it's work performance, whether it's medicinal, whether it's methamphetamine, cannabis, cocaine, a number of these drugs, MDMA, shown all of these beneficial effects, these positive effects. Now, I am not saying that drugs don't have the potential to produce negative effects, because they do. But I hate that I have to say that, because it's such an adolescent thing to have to say. No shit. You know, it's like if you are, I don't know, driving an automobile. Driving an automobile has a potential negative effect. But I don't have to say that, I hope. But I have to say this with drugs, because we're so adolescent in this country when it comes to drugs. What I'm emphasizing is the overwhelming effects produced by these drugs are positive. That's what I'm emphasizing. So please don't misinterpret my words as some media outlets like to do and say that I say that drugs don't have no negative effects. It's just that I'm tired of being a fucking child. I don't want to have to say that every time. I just hope that the audience is mature enough to know this. And another sort of thing people shut down conversation is, what about the kids? My conversation is for adults. My youngest kid is 21. I don't want to deal with kids. I did that. And you know, for my kids, I had the parent. That was the most important thing. And that's the same thing for everyone else. You have the parent. There are no shortcuts. And so it's like, don't put that on me. That's your job. Another reality. This is a reality that really shocked me and really got me to think about what's really going on. The policies that we have for most of our drugs in this country, they were motivated by racism and classism, going after people who were brown and poor people. So when we think about the policies, our first federal drug policy restricting opioids and cocaine were motivated by our dislike of Chinese folks and black people in this country. This is just a slide from 1914 New York Times, where a distinguished physician was writing about the Negro cocaine fiends who were a new Southern menace. But this kind of thing really propelled the first legislation, the Harrison Act of 1914. And then there were other sort of acts going after people we didn't like. San Francisco was one of the early cities in 1875 to pass ordinance that were restricting white folks from frequenting the Chinese opium dens in order to shut those dens down to make sure that they go out of business. Then we can think about the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act that was motivated primarily for going after Mexican Americans, saying that when they smoke marijuana, they go crazy, they go loco. And so these sorts of things really disturbed me when I started to think about what we're doing today. We're going after poor people with our drug policies. Whether they're poor white people, whether they are poor minorities, it's the same sort of motivations that happened early on. And now I think about being a patriot. I'm coming back to being a patriot, going back to serving in the military. My time in the military has really forced me to think about what it means to be a patriot. I think about the politicians with the flags on their lapel, and they think that's patriotism. That's superficial shit. That's not patriotism. What I said earlier about taking care of other people's rights, particularly the original promise of the country in the Declaration of Independence that guaranteed all of us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Guaranteed all of us that. Now, I have to say something about liberty, in part because of this coronavirus thing and vaccination and the mask and the way this shit has got so distorted. When I talk about liberty, I think about liberty in that you have the right to live your life as you see fit, so long as you are not preventing others from doing the same. That's liberty. So now when we think about the context that we're in today, the coronavirus and so forth, people don't want to be vaccinated, don't want to wear masks, it's like that's cool if you are not going to interact with other people. That's absolutely fine. But I don't have that right if I'm going to interact with folks. And so I personally have to get vaccinated because I have to interact with people and I don't have the right. It would be like me going to a public swimming pool and pooping in the pool. I don't have that right. I don't have that right. And so back to this issue of rights and protecting other people's rights. When we think about protecting other people's liberties and rights, that's what it means to be a patriot. And if you're not standing up for the rights of people who use heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, then what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? We're all here singing the praises of psychedelics, which is cool. But we also have a responsibility to stand up for the rights of other people. And so when I think about this in this context, I don't understand how we are not fighting to make sure we legally regulate all of the things that people are seeking. Then that way we control it. We make sure that we have quality control. We make sure we control the dosing. We make sure we control the route of administration. We make sure we educate people as opposed to what we're doing. So I don't understand when I see people singing the praises of one drug and disparaging another drug. I just don't understand that. And so I want to encourage you all not to do such a thing. And as you go about doing this, make sure you keep the focus on evidence and not anecdotes. I mean, anecdotes are cool to make sure that people remember the evidence or the body of data. That's cool, but evidence alone, anecdote alone is not going to do it. So you keep the focus on the evidence. When we keep the focus on the evidence, then you start to see the bullshit stories that we've been told and we're currently telling. You start to see that they fall apart. With that, I want to open it up for questions because there's a lot more to say, and I want to thank you for your time.
Dr. Hart, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
And thank you for, I've been following your work for many years, and I want to thank you for changing my perception of, I was thinking, psychedelics are the shit, and it's holistic, and it's plant medicine, and you helped me to see things in the right way, where there's no right or wrong medicines or drugs. They all can be used in a good or bad way. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
My question is, you recently joined MAPS Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. I want to congratulate you and also MAPS with that. And my question is, what's your goal with joining this organization? What you want to give and what you want to take? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Rick Doblin, who is the ED Executive Director of MAPS, Rick is one of my heroes, in part because he manages to be so optimistic in the face of overwhelming odds, in the face of such negativity. And so I'm trying to be more like Rick. And so I joined to be able to help him in any way he sees fit or he thinks is appropriate for me. And I also am really encouraged by Matt's efforts to make MDMA a legal medicine for people who need it. And so I want to help them. And so I just want to serve as part of my service.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And by the way, I know there's a line building. We'll have about 10 minutes for questions right now, just so no one's disappointed when I let you know that there's only a couple left.
Hi, Dr. Hart. Thank you for all of your work. I recently got my bachelor's in biology, and I'm working in a totally unrelated research scientist position. But ultimately, I want to go get my PhD in neuroscience or psychology and participate in this really meaningful psychedelic renaissance. But being a young person, and particularly like a woman in STEM, and I'm sure you would relate, being in a marginalized group in STEM as well, what advice do you have for young people who want to do this work and are so passionate, but are terrified of being discredited or looked down on or disrespected in the field because of their passions? Like, I gotta go back to my coworkers and tell them where I was this weekend. I'm fucking terrified, man. Like, so any advice?
Yeah, it's a difficult one in part because, like, well, I'll say this. In science, the currency is data. And so if you put your head down and publish, then it's hard to argue with you. And so you have to do that first. If you don't do that, then you will be dismissed. And so I would just encourage you to really just focus and publish. And then once you focus and publish, but also study other sort of areas. You know, like I'm late to this. I'm trying to study sociology, some history, political science. The arts are so important, of course. And so you try to be as well-rounded as possible, and you really know your area. Because if you know your area, it's hard to argue with you because, as you know, the positions that I take are controversial. And if I didn't have data on my side, I assure you, I wouldn't be standing here. I certainly wouldn't have a job, you know, but I have evidence on my side, and we say the currency is evidence, and that's the most important thing.
Hi, Professor Hart.
Hey.
I was struck by the slide on where you mentioned all drugs being the same, and I'm wondering if...
I didn't say all drugs were the same.
Well, you know, chemically, you were like the effect, right?
No, I'm saying that people who use, for example, heroin is not the same as MDMA, but people who use heroin may be experiencing similar sort of things as people who use MDMA, but it doesn't mean that they are the same.
Right. Sorry, that was an overgeneralization. But I'm wondering if there's a place in that research, or if there is a value in researching other than isolated chemicals of plants and or the sources for the psychedelic molecule. I'm thinking of alkaloids, and also along those same lines, we were talking earlier about right brain phenomena, and I'm just curious, like if in this research in psychology and neuroscience, if there's even a place or what kinds of obstacles are faced in research committed to collecting the data on something like that, like right brain phenomena and the other.
When you say right brain phenomena, do you mean like happiness?
The dancing, the singing,
yes.
the ritual heuristics and ceremony.
Yeah, so So one of the things that you should know is that the National Institute on Drug Abuse funds more than 90% of this kind of research. And their mission statement, until very recently, was to bring to bear science to focus on drug addiction and pathology, basically. And so when you talk about happiness and joy and that sort of thing, that's not what people were being funded for, and they're still not. And so you have to kind of frame your question in pathology in order to get funded. And so what that means is that there is this overrepresentation in the literature focused on pathology. And so what it also means is that what gets in the textbook, what gets in the press and so forth. But many people who study drugs, who give these drugs, also collect data on like euphoria, happiness, and all of these kinds of things. And it's there, but you just have to dig because it's not emphasized. The thing that's emphasized is the pathology. And so that's the trick, I guess.
Gotta excavate the data.
Yeah.
It's left out of the narrative.
Absolutely. So when I say that the predominant effects are positive, it's me looking at this data like that, my data included, because I play a role in promulgating this overemphasis on the negative effects of drugs. Earlier in my career, I got money, so full disclosure, I was a part of this war on drugs mentality. Thank you.
Dr. Hart, I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
So much. And just personally, how much you've alleviated the personal shame and it expanded my capacity to love and accept people, and just noticing still the shamey drug thoughts in my head earlier today. I appreciate you so much. I forget who said this thing, but I heard people don't like to change their minds in public. They like to change their minds in private. And I just wanted to say, share this man's media, because it's like so important, and I just appreciate so because you were saying these things when they were so much more difficult to say than now. Pragmatic question, real pragmatic question. So I'm from Detroit, just decriminalized, plant medicines and the language is entheogenic, and I'm with, when I get really brainy with it, I'm very much with you on that. My question is, what is helpful to say at this time when, in all intellectual honesty, the hierarchy of these are the healers, these are the plants, and as opposed to heroin, opposed to people who are suffering right now for any alleviation of their just personal shame, and then the societal stigma and changing laws. What do you suggest I say to my neighbors back home? Is this a time of celebration, or is it time to be like, hey, but by the way,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In the book, the thing I try to encourage people to do is get out of the closet. And of course, if you say this, that means you have to get out of the closet. And so, of course, that's I acknowledge to using heroin, MDMA, cocaine, all of these sort of things, not past users, current users. So people know that people who are successful do this. We know this is the case. The illicit drug trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that an industry that big cannot be supported by poor people alone. It's primarily supported by middle to upper class people, but they're in the closet, and so the society has this distorted view of what a heroin user looks like. They have a distorted view of what a methamphetamine user looks like. And so part of our job, get out of the closet, be responsible and so forth. People see this to help change people's minds.